Hi, my name is Greg Canty, and I'd like to welcome you to the Win Happy podcast. I love chatting to people from all walks of life about their lives and their careers, about the choices they make along the way to pursue their happiness, and what winning actually means to them. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I do. Thanks for listening. I can't imagine giving up my home, deciding to live in a horse-drawn caravan. I can't imagine moving to another country in that horse-drawn caravan and buying some land on a rugged peninsula. I can't imagine living in a teepee on that land through wet and damp winters with my infant children. On today's podcast, I chat about Lisa Scarff, who moved from Dorset to Sheep's Head in West Cork in 1993, made a wonderful life for herself and her children. She speaks about her love of nature, making a life in West Cork, entrepreneurship, her meadows, butterflies and moths, and turning 70. Let's hear from Lisa. Lisa Scarff, a huge welcome to the Win Happy podcast.
Thank you.
Now, you have to describe where we are sitting for the listener, because they're going to get so jealous when they realise how beautiful it is.
Okay, so we're in my wooden cabin and set in 25 acres on the Sheep's Head Peninsula in West Cork. And we look over Bantry Bay, and from the top of the farm here you can see the length of the Beara Peninsula from Glengarriff Harbour down to Bear Island. It was that view from the top field that wanted me to buy this place many years ago now.
And we're particularly lucky because it's a beautiful day, but unlike the few that have gone by. Do you enjoy it as much when it isn't so nice?
Yes, I love all the seasons for what they bring, really. So, I enjoy the coziness of the fire in the winter with the gales raging outside, and I love the summertime. Obviously is gorgeous, and we're not too far from the sea for swimming, and so each season brings something special.
If you were to believe in the power of visualization and having a picture in your head of what something might be like in years to come, I can picture myself living somewhere like this or whatever. Would this be close enough to the picture you would have had in your head years and years ago?
Yes, almost, spot on, really. I think I was living in southwest of England in Dorset, and I'd been to Ireland a few times on holiday, and we had this sort of vision that maybe we'd come to Ireland and do the whole back to the land trip, and that was very exciting. Although when it actually came to it, I got cold feet because I was actually really happy where I was living. And when the dream started to become a reality, it felt a bit different. And I used to sort of wake up at 3 a.m. thinking, what am I doing? I think I don't really want to go anywhere. I love Dorset. But I decided to come for the adventure. And the vision had been to live on a hillside or a wild mountainside and grow food and, be close to nature and live near the sea. And really, I think this piece of land did come up, and it does fulfill that, absolutely. I didn't have any sensible thoughts, like with a young family, the driving that might have me driving everywhere to take kids to school or to connect with friends. It was just this vision of living somewhere wild and beautiful.
Yeah, because there is that practical side of life as well. And
yes.
As you were saying, schools and shopping and all of that kind of thing. And earning a living, And
earning a living as well,
But you figured it out.
Yes. Not necessarily by accident often, or it just went with the flow.
Yeah, I get the impression with you from our chats that you have a little bit of faith that things will look after themselves in some way.
Yeah. I think also I was a sort of single parent when my girls were quite young, so sometimes my earning a living was very much tied into where they were going to be going to school. So, although we did home educate for a short period as well, but then they both aspired to go to the Scarff secondary school. So I got myself a job in the local health food shop down there. And I think after 4 years, there was the opportunity to buy the business, which I was very reluctant to do because I had no experience in business at all. Anyway, I was persuaded and took on the Roaring Water health food shop down in Scarff. And my girls were by this time in the secondary school there. And it was great because, I was around if they wanted to do extracurricular activities and drop them off in school and then go to work. And of course, they were able to have Saturday jobs and after school work and things like that. So it was a win-win for the family, really.
So you were an unlikely entrepreneur, were you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
A reluctant one.
Yeah. Again, from what I know of you, I would have thought, God almighty, this is the last person on this earth that I would have thought, say, yeah, okay, I'll buy the business and run a business for a while. Did you have any experience before that of running anything or...
No, I'd worked as, in the UK, I'd worked as a social worker. I'd worked in a planning department, so I'd always been an employee. And then when I came here, I worked in the whole food shop in Bantry, and then I'd worked in the whole food shop in Scarff, and done a few other things as well. So no, it was a completely new venture and responsibility, really.
So you mentioned Dorset, where you grew up. Were you in the country or were you in...
Yes, I was in a small village a few miles from the coast, yeah.
Okay, what did Mum and Dad do?
Dad was a lettering artist, and my mum was an at-home mum, and then later on she was working in an accounting department. And that was a new thing for her to go back to work, when we were of a certain age. Yeah, my dad was a commercial artist, and I think in the mid-60s there was a bit of a recession in the UK. And he was quite adventurous, and we actually ended up moving to the Balearic Islands. And he didn't take out a pension plan like most people might do, sensible people. He bought a very small little cottage in Minorca in the Balearic Islands. And when times were hard, we sold the house in England and went to live in Spain for about 2 years. But it was not a particularly touristy island at that point, and it was so it didn't really work out. But for myself and my brother, it was probably the highlight of my childhood was living there, and we went to school, which wasn't particularly enjoyable, but we just had so much freedom, while the parents were having all the worries and responsibilities. We were just having a great time exploring the island, and yeah.
So with those house moves, how old would you have been?
I think I was probably 10, and then we came back and we were living with my grandmother in London, and that was quite a difficult time, I think, for the whole family, very stressful. And I went to a big comprehensive school in London, and I probably looked like something from another planet. I had sort of long blonde hair, and I didn't know anything about popular music or fashion or anything. I'd been living this rather wild life on a Spanish island, and that was quite a culture shock and quite a tough time, really. But I was also actually very good at sports. I was never actually bullied, even though I didn't really connect with people. I survived the experience anyway. And I did spend a few years living in London, which was great. In my late teens, lots of music, and it was great fun. Then I spent most of my weekends going out in South Wales or going down to the New Forest or different countryside places. And I think that pull to live in rurally was very strong. And I had an opportunity to take a transfer with a job, and I was then working in Weymouth in Dorset. And I was there living in Dorset in various locations till I came to Ireland in 1993.
The young kid who gets told, we're packing our bags and we're heading off to an island, or we're packing our bags and we're coming back. Were there discussions around that, or did you just get to hear about it? We're on the move next week.
Yes.
How did all that come about?
Yes, it wasn't something, I was never part of that. How's that going to be for me or anything like that. I think it was quite a tough one for my mum as well, really. But,
She didn't know a whole pile.
Well, she knew about it, but I'm not quite sure. Yes, I think she wouldn't be particularly adventurous, and so it was quite a big thing looking back on it, you know.
Were Mum and Dad quite different?
Yes, probably they were. Yeah. It was an amazing experience living there. Yeah. One that I think my brother would say the same thing. It's something we look back on that time with not so much around the family time, but we just had quite a lot of freedom, and yeah, it was great.
Did your parents realise you were having the time of your lives, did they?
I think they were quite caught up in their own, the worry, and not having a lot of money, and the money they did have was running out very fast, and my dad trying to find work. And
he was doing really what you've done, wasn't it? Making big life changes and all that kind of thing, and hoping it'll work out, obviously. Let's try here.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, there were great changes at that time, and I think everything was becoming more computerized, and, the skills of the lettering artist, I think, were probably just not in vogue anymore. So I think that was a very difficult time for him, and I think it was possibly quite challenging to move forward into a new era in that work. And
that's happened so many times since then, with the new technology affecting, like, we have a graphic design team.
Yes.
And of course all the guys are doing stuff on their computers. I know they still sketch a lot. I know when they're, creating logos or anything like that, they do sketch away manually and then they put it to work on the computers.
But I remember him so well. He'd have his wooden, art board on the table there, and there was, paints and brushes and, beautiful work, really all done by hand.
Yeah. Just got cut out at the wrong time.
Yes.
Probably, just as things were changing.
Because I think he had been doing very well, and, had bought this little house in Spain, and that was his security for the future and everything. And then everything changed.
Do you remember that house?
In Spain?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, very much so. And we did go back a few times afterwards for sort of holidays and things, but my parents separated and the house was sold. And
what were the conversations around the kitchen table when you were growing up?
When I was growing up, when I was living in Spain?
With the family generally.
It's interesting. I don't really remember that. I don't really so much remember the family thing. I just remember, waking up and going off and taking a picnic. And it was quite unusual, really, because I'd worked and done gardening for people and watered people's gardens and done all sorts of things. And I'd earned enough money to buy a donkey. And I remember taking this donkey, was tied onto a well and was, walking around and pulling up the buckets and everything. And he was literally unhitched. And I walked the 9 kilometres home with this donkey. And my friend also bought a donkey.
That's wonderful.
And so we used to go off with these donkeys and explore all these lanes and the countryside. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, because as we sat down here, I saw a little donkey just...
Well, we were chatting earlier about interest remaining the same, and I was thinking, I used to love going off exploring as an 11-year-old. There was this little tribe of children, with a couple of donkeys, and we were off on an adventure. And when I came here, some friends were moving back to England, and we took on their donkey for them, who's had a foal, and I still have them both. Yeah.
Do you remember those books that we used to read at that time? I think they were Enid Blyton.
Oh, yes, the
Famous
Adventures.
Five. And
Famous Five.
The Secret Seven.
I did used to read those books.
But that's what they were all about.
It was all about
Kids
having adventures and going off. And yes.
No wonder some of us ended up doing things like that. Were you aware that family income or whatever was dependent on your dad? As a kid, would you have known, this is a tight time, or were you just oblivious to all of that?
It's hard to know what I was conscious of then and what I can look back on. And my dad would have been a real traditional socialist, a very proud man as well. And I think it was quite hard for him hitting hard times, and particularly moving back to London and living with my mum's extended family.
Can you imagine? Oh my God, come live with me.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how well these people get on with each other, but under the same roof.
Yes, and that was a really challenging time. And I think put a lot of strain on the relationship as well. Yeah, and we moved around quite a lot, in rented accommodation, things like that. So, and then my parents split up, really, the stress and strain of all that.
Do they love each other, do you think?
I think there was a lot of challenges. Yes, I'm not sure how they would have felt about each other, but they moved apart. But my father, I think it was that generation when it was actually quite, he felt he'd failed, that my mum was going out to work to earn money, and he wasn't able to provide for the family without that support. That was very difficult for him. Yeah. And I can feel for him looking back, because, it's a different generation, different time. Yeah.
Yeah, and not being sexist or anything, but maybe it's an old idea, but the idea that the man has to provide for the family.
Yes.
A simple idea, which is pretty much the way society was built.
Yes.
And that must have been very tough for him. It must have been really hard for him.
But I think my mum, she loved going out back into the workplace.
Yeah, good for her.
Yes, she did, yeah.
So when it came to you and picking subjects in school and all that kind of thing, because I heard you saying you did social work.
Yes.
What was your journey towards doing something like that?
Well, I left school at 16, and I think I wanted to go to art college at the time. But I think my dad was very much of an attitude, look, I worked my way up from being a tea boy and in an art studio, and all these kids going off to college and all that with their fancy portfolios. So he was really not that supportive of the idea at all. But I think I left home, and I was renting a place, and I got a job in the land registry, but it was actually in the mapping department. So I was sort of doing, and then we were doing, maps with paintbrushes and crow quills, and so it was actually, they used to call us frustrated artists in this department. So
it's taken after your dad, really, wasn't it?
Yes, in a way it was, Then, I did that for a while, and that was my time in London. And that's it. I had the opportunity for a transfer to Dorset in that department. And then I'd had enough, really, of the job I was doing. And
Too many maps.
But I only had 5 CSEs or something like that at grade 1 or whatever. So not a lot of qualifications, but I could get on to do a teacher training course. So that's what I did. That was my gateway to higher education. And I did a year teacher training. Decided I absolutely didn't want to be a teacher after a couple of quite challenging placements. But I had done quite well in the academic work. And
you didn't enjoy standing at the top of a class with little brats.
And they realised that my spelling was my weak point as well. So no, it was really not for me. But I'd done well enough in the academic work that they allowed me to transfer on to an environmental science degree course, which was absolutely right up my street. So I spent the next 3 years ecology and all sorts, and that was great. And
you were finding your groove now, weren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. It takes a while, doesn't it, for people?
Absolutely.
You're very lucky if you stumble upon that passion thing immediately.
Yes.
But sometimes you have to take a few alternative routes.
Yes, and there were half a dozen mature students on that course. And we all did really well, because I think we really wanted to be there. We were really interested. And that was great. And I did some great placements there, working conservation work. So when I finished, I really wanted to work in some area of conservation. But they were, few and far between. It would have also meant possibly leaving Dorset, and I quite wanted to stay in the Dorset area. So I remember taking a temporary part-time job. I remember going for the interview, and it was 15 kilometres on my moped, and it was freezing, and I arrived and I had this
stiff as a poker.
Yes, I was, and I had this constant dewdrop on my nose. Yeah. And I remember thinking, what am I doing here? I really don't want this job. Anyway, I went in for the interview. The deputy manager, who became a really good friend of mine, who was a smallholder, and we ended up talking more about his smallholding, I think, than the job. So I took the job, temporary part-time, which became full-time, permanent, working with young teenagers with mental disabilities. I'm not quite sure what the correct PC term is now, but and I loved it. From something I just thought, why am I even at this interview? I really want to be doing conservation work. I just was really inspired. I worked there for a number of years, and then I got offered to train as a social worker. So that would mean being seconded by Dorset County Council. So I did a year in the area office, and I was with all the different teams, childcare, mental health, working with the elderly. And then I left Dorset for 2 years and went to Oxford Poly, where I did my social work training. So that's how I ended up. And then, of course, because I'd been seconded, I was obligated to work for 4 years when I'd finished the course, which was grand. So that's what I was doing.
Did you enjoy that work?
I did. But I remember when I went for my interview for the job after the course, they did ask me if I would rather be in politics than social work, because I think I was very idealistic, and I somehow thought, I'd be changing the world and influencing policy and all this kind of thing. And of course, it wasn't really like that at all.
Your father's daughter.
Yes.
From the sounds of it.
Yes, absolutely. And I had wanted to work in mental health, but the only vacancies were in childcare. So that's what I did afterwards, was working in childcare. Yes, it was quite an intense job, definitely.
What age would these children have been?
Well, I worked with children and families. So sometimes I was the social worker for the child, or other situations I was working with the whole family.
Yeah. What did you learn from that time?
That I wasn't going to change the world, really. So it felt like you were just crisis managing all the time. There was very little time to do any preventative work or the kind of support you might have wanted to do. It was just felt like going from one crisis to another, really.
Pushing water up a hill.
Yes, it did feel like that a bit. And then I'd met the father of my children. In fact, I met him. I went to say goodbye to friends when I'd rented my house out in Dorset, and I was going off to Oxford for 2 years. Went to have a farewell supper with some friends of mine, friends and neighbours, and he was there, and that set off, well, it's like, hello, nice to meet you, and I'm off for 2 years. But we started writing to each other, and...
You mean pen and paper?
Pen and paper.
My goodness.
Absolutely. Pen and
those
paper.
Things still existed at that time.
And he was a very interesting character. He was travelling the southwest of England in a horse and caravan and sharpening people's shears and knives.
What was his background? That he ended up doing something like that.
Okay, so, very comfortable background. He went to a sort of one of the top public Catholic schools in the UK. And much to his parents' disappointment, he dropped out when he'd finished. I mean, he was sort of Oxford, Cambridge material, and that's certainly what they had in mind for him. No, he had other ideas, and he dropped out and went to live in a community on the Shetland Islands and taught meditation in Switzerland, and then with his horse-drawn caravan went off exploring the southwest of England. So he was very inspirational and a very interesting person. He'd be travelling in the southwest, and I had an old Morris Traveller that literally was held together with baler twine. And I used to make the journey from Oxford down to some gorgeous place on Dartmoor or Exmoor, and in his letters he'd do little maps of where he was, and it was was great. And I usually managed to find my way there. And so I had this complete contrast to doing my course and then being in some gorgeous location in the southwest of England.
You were torn between two different worlds, really, weren't you?
Yes.
Jumping from one to the other.
Yes. But I suppose he was very inspirational in, a different sort of lifestyle. I suppose I had left home, I was renting, I was, paying my rent, and that kept me in, always needed to be in work, and somebody who'd done something completely different,
You comfortable with the level of difference?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I met some really interesting people as well, because he'd often pull up on farms and had a whole network of people he knew over. I think he'd been on the road for maybe 12 years, just like summertime, spring, summer and autumn perhaps. And then he'd pull up on a farm for the winter months and help with whatever was needed. So when I moved back after 2 years, he pulled up with a caravan on my driveway. And that was it.
Yeah, he was all in. He was going to anchor down.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think then that's the whole vision, to come to Ireland. I think he was dying to sort of perhaps settle down and, grow vegetables. And
he probably needed a partner as well to fulfill his aspirations around that. And obviously there were things that you wanted to do, and he opened that door for you as well.
Yes. And obviously I had my obligation to be working for Dorset County Council too. So I think the seed was sown really at some point, that we would come on holiday. We had friends in Ireland. And so I'm trying to think of the timing of it all, but I might have even worked for more than 4 years with Dorset County Council. But at some point, oh, that's right. So I was pregnant with my first daughter, my first child, and I didn't really want to go back to work after. I only got 6 weeks, 2 months maternity leave, and I was quite a late in life mum, and I really wanted to enjoy bringing up my child. So I rented out my house again, and we'd met a lovely farmer, Bob Tolley his name was. We'd been travelling at the weekend in the horse and caravan. And
holding up all the traffic behind you?
Yeah, well, we were actually on this very old Roman road where there weren't really any cars. And we were cooking supper over the fire, and it was almost like a sort of, some vision, this character. I remember I can see it now clearly. He had this sort of Eton straw hat. He was all bareback on this horse with his big tummy sort of on the withers, and he had sideburns down here. And anyway, he pulled up and he joined us for supper, and we had a really interesting evening, and we were actually adjacent to the land he farmed, and told him what we were doing and the aspiration to move to Ireland. And he said, well, why don't you pull up on my farm? So we did. And I think we were probably there for a year.
Where was that?
18 months. This was just outside of Bedminster in Dorset. And that was an amazing experience. And he was such a character, lovely wife.
Lots of suppers with Bob and his wife.
Yes, lots of cups of tea in the farmhouse kitchen. And he used to work horses. So that was really inspiring. And again, met some really interesting people there. And I suppose, so we had the caravan, and we bought this horse truck, which he was converting to make a living space. But we were 100 foot up on a north-facing slope, and it was absolutely beautiful. It was lovely. It was very remote, and we were ready to walk across the fields to collect the post and have a cup of tea in the kitchen with them. And we made our plans to come to Ireland. But I suppose it was at that point, when I had my daughter, and I was just sort of loving the life that we were sort of created there, and the freedom of not working as well. So I thought, okay, we'll give it a go. We'll go to Ireland and Yeah, so we did. So I think we must have been there for about 18 months on the farm.
And how did you come to Ireland? Was it just off the ferry with your bags and baggage, or did you actually bring the...
Well, the original idea had been I'd really fancied the idea of travelling in the horse and caravan, because that's something, I hadn't had that experience. I mean, a few weeks here and there or weekends or whatever, and we thought it'd be amazing perhaps to do West Dorset to West Cork with the horse and caravan. But practically, we had 2 horses, we had 2 cats, we had a baby, and we just decided no. And also, we'd been on holiday, I'd actually seen this piece of land. So there was quite a pull to West Cork, and been walking here, had been up to that top field and had completely fallen in love with this piece of land.
And actually this piece of land,
Mm-hmm.
Oh. How did you discover it?
Well, I'd been out to, this is when I was on holiday, I'd been out to a party with an American, Dan Hummel, who lives down the end of the peninsula, who quite a character, and he had built a little stone house on the cliff. He had a hot tub and by the lakeside, and I was just blown away when I went out there. It was absolutely beautiful. Had this lovely party, but on the way back we'd seen a sign saying land for sale, and just out of curiosity had come to have a look. And the people here, in actual fact, they were selling a 4-acre site, and they hadn't decided about whether they'd sell the bulk of the farm. So they said, you go back to the UK and we'll have a think on what we want to do. And when you're over here, we'll speak again. And in the meantime, I was thinking, wow, it's a bit mad. We haven't even looked around, we haven't really explored West Cork. So came back, did a bit of exploration and decided that this really was the place we wanted to be. And they agreed to sell, and so we went from there. Yeah.
Do you remember the first day rocking up here?
After it had been born?
Yeah. Deal done, and now we need to,
Yes, well, we had the horse truck was on the land for that first summer. And
did you bring it over from the UK?
Brought that over from the UK.
And the horses?
The horse, my partner's horse, who had pulled the caravan, we left him with friends who had a farm and they were working horses. But I'd had a horse that I did bring with me. He didn't pull the caravan or anything like that. And he came in quite a fancy horse truck and was delivered.
He travelled first class.
He travelled first class, yes, absolutely. And then my partner driven the horse truck over, and I'd driven over in the car with Rosie, my eldest daughter. Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And when you got here, then there was no physical building here or anything like that?
No, so what we did, and obviously we're sort of going through with the purchase as well. So when we arrived, we actually rented a cottage in Akista, which is 5 minutes in the car from here. And that's when we were doing, buying the place. And then, so it must have been the following summer that we pulled the truck up on to the land here. Yeah. And then because there wasn't anything here, we were sort of camping in the summer. 2 summers we kind of camped here. And we also were very lucky to rent a little cottage in Glenlock here. So we had somewhere, it was just a winter let, so we had somewhere for the winter time. So then the first summer in the horse truck, and then the second summer we borrowed a teepee from friends of mine.
You love that teepee from what you were telling me.
I love the teepee when the sun was shining, but it was a very wet summer and it was very challenging. Yeah. You used to have to cover the beds with plastic sheets because the water would just run down the poles and yes. Actually, by that time, I lose the sense of the years actually, because when we were in the teepee that year, I actually had my second daughter by then as well. So that was quite challenging, but we survived it. And then I think that following winter we actually separated. So that was when I decided to find something, to move up onto the land more permanently.
And the separation part, because it sounds like this was the dream being realised, and We see you had young children, which is always, I think, a pressurized time in
Yes,
any
I think
relationship.
so.
Yeah, when the focus goes, nearly 100% into these little creatures that you have. Is that very hard?
Yes, I think it was really. Yes, I mean, we're sort of good friends now, and we do have a lot in common. We really do. So you wonder why we didn't quite make it. So it's hard to really perhaps pinpoint why we didn't. But I think, as you say, the stresses and strains maybe with a young family as well. And yes, trying to earn a living and trying to perhaps have somewhere to live up here. Yeah, so the stresses and strains, I think, yeah.
A bit like your mum and dad, if you think about
Yes,
it, with all of that again. So you were here then, and you were done with the teepee.
Done with the teepee.
Throw that thing out.
Yes. So I purchased a wooden sectional hut, and that's really was the start of the house we're sitting in now. So it was very basic at the time. Didn't have electricity. It was warm and dry. Had a wood burning stove. Had a cooker. Had a mattress on the floor, and we used to do dishes in the stream until I got a sink. Everything evolved very slowly, but it was warm and dry, and it was home. And so
after the teepee, you were happy
yes,
with anything.
Absolutely, yes.
And then making a living here for yourself, and
yes.
So how did that evolve? And obviously, you were saying you were working in the health shops.
Yes, that came later. So I think in those first few years, we sort of had a polytunnel, started some raised beds, and growing some food. Get seaweed and manure from a neighbour. And yes, so there was a country market in Bantry, and I used to sell plants and vegetables.
On a Friday?
Yes, on a Friday. And that was great. But it was sort of money that you could sort of reinvest into the land.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really providing an income at all. So I just tried various jobs, really. I was working, as I said, in the whole food shop in Bantry. And what else did I do? Oh, I was monitoring pollution on the beaches. That was with Antashka. Yeah, so various other things. I was gardening for people as well. I think in West Cork, people just turn their hand to what you could to earn a bob or two, really.
Yeah, everyone is doing that here, aren't they? Everyone's picking away in their own little way.
Yes, and
but
having your
here.
finger in a few pies as well, I think, rather than necessarily, the career. If you weren't having that, then, you bit of money from here and a bit from there, and
It seems to be the trade-off that we'll live the idyllic life, but that comes with, all the challenges of rural living, where it's really quiet in the winter, obviously.
Yes.
It's a bit seasonal and touristy and all that kind of thing. So it does change later, but people are more than happy to do all of those bits and bobs.
Yes, and I think if you don't necessarily, if you're happy for things to evolve slowly, I mean, it didn't ever seem a problem that we didn't have electricity or we didn't have a phone connected. It wasn't necessarily that we consciously made those decisions. It's just things would happen in time.
Tell me about the butterflies.
Butterflies. Okay, so I had as I said before, I was always really interested in nature and had a vision for the place here of increasing biodiversity by looking after the habitats that were here, which was a number of small meadows, and there were areas of thicket which was really overgrown gorse and brambles. So over time cleared into those areas and planted trees, so created small areas of woodland, which they've evolved over time really, because some years might just plant 20 trees, other years 100 and 200 trees. So there are now a number of acres of woodland of varying ages. The meadows had been quite infested with ragwort because the land had been rented out and had been quite badly poached. And anyway, we had ragwort pulling parties, and friends gathered, pulled ragwort, and then we had music and dancing. And I mean, I don't have a problem with ragwort if it's a little bit because there are certain invertebrates it's their favourite food plant, like the cinnabar moth, for example. But it was a sort of a monoculture of ragwort. So the meadows have been brought back into good heart, and I do a monitoring of the different wildflowers that are there. And I suppose the butterflies, I can't remember that point when I sort of woke up to butterflies, but I was seeing them as an indicator of the health of the ecosystem. Because it's not just the adult butterfly. You've got to have the right larval food plants, and often those species, they overwinter as maybe a chrysalis or something, so it's just having that habitat for the butterfly life cycle. So I started monitoring the butterflies for the Ireland's Biodiversity Centre.
No, I actually know about that.
You do know about
it? Which is quite incredible because, so the bit of work that I did for a while was podcasting for the Heritage Council.
Okay.
And I just get a note from the guy I was dealing with saying, okay, this week we want to cover coinage in Ireland. You have to talk to Lisa, who's an expert on coinage in Ireland, and you're just given the barest amount of details. And yeah, I do my own little bit of Mr. Google. They would give me a rough sketch of what they wanted, and you'd contact Lisa, probably all during COVID, and you'd have the big conversation about coinage. The following week, it was about St. Patrick and the legend and
yes.
And then it was the person who ran the National Biodiversity Data Centre and what that was all about. And I think as part of that particular series, I ended up talking to a farmer. I think it was in Tipperary, and I think he was doing the same thing that you were, just monitoring, the different wildlife and stuff in those areas.
Yes.
And you have to do it consistently, don't you? Taking a particular walk, and how has it changed?
So what I would do would be, it's over 26 weeks, so from the 1st of April to the end of September. So I have the same route around the land, and I sort of chose the route myself, and that would take in the different habitats. And then I monitor the butterflies I see. So I tend to choose a sunny day if possible, and I just record the species as I do the walk.
Just pen and paper and...
Just pen and paper.
Yeah.
And then you have a record sheet, which at the end of the year you send those 26 record sheets into the Biodiversity Centre. And they've actually just published an atlas, which I think was from 2021. I forget the years actually, but over a few years, comparing the butterflies over that period of time. It's a fantastic scheme. And I also do moth trapping and moth recording, again, you send it to Moths Ireland, but they then share that information with the Biodiversity Centre.
So you know a lot about moths and
So I'm learning a lot
butterflies.
About moths, yes. But it's I think there's 35 species of butterflies in Ireland, and we've actually recorded 22 of them on the land here.
So do you get excited if you spotted one that you hadn't spotted before?
Absolutely.
This is a big day.
Yes, last year there was a very heavy sort of orange butterfly, and managed to get close up to it, and it was a dark green fritillary butterfly. And that's the first time we'd ever seen one on the land here. So that was very exciting. And it stayed around. It was a female. And I was in contact with Jesmond Harding, who's the sort of one of the butterfly experts in Ireland, and he was saying, yes, it's a female, and that's fantastic. So I'm hoping, that she chose to lay eggs here, and, maybe we'll see.
A family,
yeah. So that was very exciting. And I'm really into photography as well. So I do record all the butterflies that I see. So I did get some nice photographs. So I was delighted.
And that brings us then, I think, to the postcards, am I right?
Yes, so I, just as a hobby really, I did a series of cards. Sort of started off and still, landscapes around West Cork, but also might be butterflies or birds so I do that as well.
Is the camera close by to you all of the time? Do you bring it everywhere with you?
Yes, well I have it's a Canon SX70. And it's a lovely camera because it's a bridge camera. It's really uncomplicated. I'm not a photographer as such. I just put it on auto, but it's got a great zoom lens, so it's great for wildlife. And I was off at the Salty Islands, and I was recording, puffins, and there were all these photographers with these really big cameras all on tripods, and I was sort of thinking, I wonder if I should maybe take all this more seriously and upgrade my camera. But at the end of the day, I like to walk, and I like to have my camera with me, so I don't want to be lugging around a big heavy camera and lenses. This, I can walk with it around my neck, and it's always there to record what I see. So
walk and snap.
And snap. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And I haven't got to faff around with focusing or shutter speeds or anything. It's just on auto, and it's been great. In fact, those pictures behind you are just some of the photos there.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and I've done a couple of exhibitions of the land here. It was a meadow exhibition, and they included butterflies and the flowers in the meadows and everything, and a few moths as well. So moths are much more. There's 1,500 species of moths in Ireland, so I think I've probably got the names of about 100 now. So that's going to be a lot more learning.
Eventually, you'll know the whole lot of them.
Yes, but they are quite amazing because there are day-flying moths as well, of course. But to think that these beautiful creatures, and they are really beautiful, as interesting to as butterflies and their colours and patterns and everything, that they sort of exist alongside you, but you never see them unless you do the trapping. And it's kind of a bit like somebody described it as Christmas, because you go, you've got your trap, you've got the light, they're attracted to the light. The trap's full of egg boxes where they settle in. So in the morning when you go to see what's there, it's like opening up a Christmas present. And you can be quite surprised. You might have something that's quite rare or,
And is that a daily practice or?
No, I might do, once or twice a week in different habitats. So there might be species that are specific to the woodland, or eventually, I do feel I've been very lucky to get to know a piece of land so intimately over this 32 years now. And I'd like to have a database. At the moment, it's all written on notes everywhere, but on the computer with everything from ferns to fungi to moths, butterflies, and build that database for these 25 acres.
And have you done everything that you wanted to do on the land?
Yes, I think so. I have a lovely, warm, dry, comfortable home. The meadows are looking great. The woodlands are developing slowly. Built some ponds, and so there's, we have jays now, and yes, I've definitely seen the flora and fauna become more diverse over the years.
Your dance with entrepreneurship and the shop. I'm kind of thinking to myself that the Roaring Water health store in Scarff, which is a very seasonal location.
Yes.
Obviously it clears out for the most part. And then picking away during the quiet winter months and everything. I presume just working in the store alone, I presume is a very interesting thing. And getting to know the people coming through and everything. Who is in Scarff from one end of the year and who comes through that door?
Yes, well, I think although it is very, you'd think it would be very seasonal there, maybe 8 weeks of the summer is incredibly busy. But I think we always had a good customer base all year round and would really make an effort to make sure people could have what they wanted when they came in the shop. And I think I quite prided myself in that. If somebody asked for something, I was able to say, yes, we have that. And I suppose you sell more supplements in the winter time as well. So, vitamin C and all the vitamin D and everything. I think I loved working there because it was never so busy that you didn't have time to have the chat with people across the counter. And that was a big part of working there, really. And I like people. I suppose it's quite isolated here. So that was always very sociable as well. A nice contrast.
Your two worlds.
My two worlds, yes. That just some lovely, lovely people, both local and visitors. And really enjoyed the conversations and the chats.
Yeah, and West Cork does attract all
sorts
I
of
think.
people. Yeah.
So the locals and everyone who's descended upon the place, I always think in many respects, it's like people who've cracked the code in life and they figured out this is a good place to park up.
Yes.
Are people happy here? Because you're meeting them every single day. And of course, in a health shop, I presume there's a particular type of shopper as well. It's not your regular shopper, so you're not going to get everyone coming in there. Maybe it's a strange question that I'm asking.
But I think over time, I mean, I think you think of maybe the whole food shops, pieces of the blow-ins coming in. But actually, that really changed. And I think the shop attracted all sorts of people, from local farmers coming in for something for the stiff joints to all sorts from all walks of life. And I think that's something that I really enjoyed. And I actually retired from the shop 2 years ago now, which is quite a hard decision in some ways. But actually, I really knew if I didn't, I wouldn't have the space in my life to do other things, because it comes with a lot of responsibility running a business. But I'm lucky enough that the person who bought the business, lovely young man locally in Scarff, and now I work for him a day a week. So
that must be so odd.
I'm his Saturday girl. So that's really great, because one of the things that was difficult to make that decision to let go of the business was just missing being part of the community that I'd been a part of there for 19 years. So no, I still, will see people and can still maintain those connections, which is really nice. Yeah.
Have people copped onto the benefits of health food? It sounds to me like from what you're saying that over time people are more tuned into.
People are really taking responsibility for their health a lot more, and reading, and I suppose with the internet, and so they are, and they're coming in and they've done their reading, and they perhaps want to talk things over, but they know what they want to get. Yeah.
Yeah. Am I allowed to talk about the 70?
70?
Yeah.
Yes, so 70 this year. Yeah, it feels grand. I mean, I'm feeling good. Yeah, knees are a bit cropped sometimes, but I just take it easy, or I pace myself a little bit. Yeah, I think West Cork's a great place to be, and it's quite a few. I was at a 70th birthday party last night with a friend. There's a few of us turning 70 this year in the area, and it was lovely to see people there that perhaps I haven't seen for a good few years, and people who've blown in here or been here all the time and still here and still appreciating being in this lovely part of the world, really.
Yeah. And whether you're a blow-in or you're not, you're here today. And that's all we have.
Yes.
Being very practical about it. So it doesn't matter whether it's forever or you're just here on holidays. I was telling you before we hit the record button that there was a pal of mine, and I was really struggling, with those numbers. And I had a relatively big number recently as well, which was 60, and it wrecked my head. It really did, and maybe I'm starting to come out of it a little bit now. We met you at a party. My young cousin, Mick, big shout out to Mick, one of these cousins that you never see from one decade to the other unless it's a funeral or something. We bumped into him because he just happened to be working in Nico's, the lovely restaurant in Skull. So he invited us to the party, and we meet the lovely Lisa, and we ended up having a great chat, and the 70 was mentioned. I remember thinking, oh wow, I love her attitude and the whole aura around you. I thought that was really fabulous. And so you're wearing it well, and you still have good attitude. Do you think about that number? I know you're saying you're creaking a little bit and all that kind of thing, but do you think about age as something that consumes you, or?
No, I don't think about it. I also have a great role model in my mother, who's 93 this year. And
what's her name?
Her name's Phyllis.
Phyllis.
Yes. And she moved over to live in Bantry just before Brexit and before COVID. And she lost two of her sisters in the UK, and we're all over here. Well, my brother's in France, actually. And she just said, I want to come to Ireland. I want to be with everybody. And she found a house.
Go Phyllis.
Go Phyllis, yes. She found a house in Bantry on the internet. And I remember having to go there and see how long it took me to walk to the library, to walk to the sea, to walk to the supermarket, feed that back to her. And she actually wanted to buy the place without even coming over. And I was saying, Mum, no, you can't do that. You've got to come and visit. So
this is quite unusual. The very spontaneous daughter.
Absolutely.
Insisting that the bit of spontaneity should be knocked out of her mother.
Yes, yes. No, she's amazing. And so she's made a super home of her bungalow. And she gardens. She just keeps herself really busy. She walks into town, and so she's an inspiration. And I think, well, if I can be as active as that when I'm 93, that's great.
Yeah, and I have the same with my mum, as I was saying to you earlier, who was 90. Would Phyllis come on the podcast, do you think?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, you'll have to ask him. We'll rock over there and...
You never know, because, she's...
Oh, for God's sake. What are you bothering with me for? What's happiness to you?
Walking in my meadows, lying down and listening to the bees, and, stalking butterflies, going off to islands, which I've an absolute fascination for. I love the physical work here. I love the planting trees. My partner lives on the Peninsula, and he's been a great support to the project. And so, we take our coffee up there, and in the winter mornings, plant trees, drink coffee, just take it all in, and feel very blessed. Yes.
And I love to put winning with happy.
Yes.
We're good at sport. Yeah, I always... You might love playing football, but it would be very pointless if you didn't have goalposts.
Yes.
And that exhilaration when the ball hits the back of the net. And so you're the ball hitting the back of the net now. What are those objectives that make you go, yes?
Well, I suppose one of the things I feel very blessed is they've all come home. I have my daughter here with my 3 grandchildren, and I think sort of created an environment where I walk with my grandson, who's showing me grasshoppers or millipedes, and I just think, wow, this is the next generation sort of carrying on and appreciating from that vision or that dream of 30 odd years ago. And there is something, that continuity as well here, which I think is quite special, and gives me a lot of fulfillment, really.
Oh, brilliant. The very last question I have for you, which is, I think in a way it's at the heart of the Win Happy idea, that we make choices along the way to get closer to things that we want to do. What was the biggest, toughest choice you had to make?
Well, I suppose what's coming to mind is at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking, I don't want to step out of my comfort zone. I'm actually quite happy where I am. I don't think, now the dream is becoming a reality. I've really got cold feet about it. I'm really, really at 3 in the morning thinking. And so I suppose it did take quite a lot of courage to come on that adventure. And I'm glad I did do that, because it's been an amazing experience being in Ireland and meeting other people who've also taken that step as well and created their dream or made their adventure happen as well. So
So it wasn't all just go for it. You did have a few anxious moments.
I did.
It wasn't as easy as all of that.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for bringing me into your lovely home. And maybe we could have a little stroll around and you might show me some of your lovely meadow.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.